the effect. Good afternoon, everyone. I am the oldest man in 40K, Mr. Brad Chester, and I've got Sean, Dice with Rice. I love saying that now, actually. Fix it, never. Holding on to it so long. Never let go, Jack. Never let go. But we've got you doing well over the weekend. Doing stuff with Marines at a big ol' event. A big ol' event. I mean, I'd give you more props if it wasn't for the fact that Sisters somehow won that event, and I'm still in stunned disbelief that that happened. So, well done, sir. Well done. Well done to you. Let's do stuff. We had you at the 300-person Super Major Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament Match Play, Tampa Bay, Florida, US Open 2023 season. I just like to read that whole entire thing. You're welcome.
That's to be expected. I expect Brad to read every word on every slide, and that way he won't get lost.
Oh, God, I hope not. That would be terrible. But you did well, and you brought, let's go on to what you did bring. Or, sorry, we ain't going to go that far. We're going to look, I want to show the little arrow of you where you placed.
That's me, right there.
Also, you did put up some fat hundos all weekend long.
Yeah, channeled my inner Thomas Ogden.
So I'm going to skip the breakdown real quick, because I want to look at the list itself. We had a triple whirlwind, turn and run. We're going to talk about how you're prepared for it, but I want to look at the list itself and to start. And I want to go over some of the whys, and then we'll talk about your games and stuff. Actually, we'll go in whatever order your little heart desires. But let's talk about, because we talk about tournament preparation all the time. And literally right before we went live, Sean and I were talking Marines, because I'm thinking about taking them to the very next thing I'm taking. With the new book, of course, because I don't play old things. I play only new shenanigans, shiny stuffs. So we want to talk about today, how we get ready, how we actually forcibly, with the practice, with the adjustments, how we adjust to the meta, and how we get ready for things. So this is what we're looking at. And as always, know the meta, don't chase the meta, because you can be wrong on your calls.
100%. Well, I guess getting right into it. Yeah, this is whirlwinding. I love whirlwinds, and so I brought 3. A lot of people were on 1, few people were on 2. I'm pretty sure I was the only person on 3. This is a not so much a meta call, but more of I wanted to maximize how I wanted to play the game. And as you'll see as we kind of like go through this is a denial list. Basically, in a nutshell, one sentence, I force you to go into reserve with your units you don't want to die, and then I take over the board. And then you realize by turn 2 and 3 that the only place you have to come in is your deployment zone in your corner. And turns out when your units basically take 3 turns off and then appear in your corner, they can't really do anything for the rest of the game, except for kill whatever I give you. So I put Baby in the corner, and Baby stays there, and then I score all my tactical secondaries. And it was a pretty good plan, honestly.
You know what? I'm super excited about this list, because not only do you have Uriel, who can put people deep striking, but you got my boy Marneus Calgar with the game's most oversized power fist, and it's awesome.
Oh, yeah. And let me tell you, Calgar did some work. Now, I guess I'll start at the top here. So, yeah, we're Ultramarines. We're true Ultramarines. We're playing the Gladius task force as intended. We have the Biologis with Bolter Discipline. It's lethal 6s. And then if we're in Dev Doctrine, it's lethal and exploding 5s. Pretty good. Just, everybody's played this unit either with it or against it at some point. Sure. Something that people weren't doing is taking the second unit of Aggressors with another Apothecary Biologis. What does that do for me? Well, it gives me lots of options, first of all. I can basically take out light targets, no problem. I'm going to be able to just put a zillion shots into whatever and pretty much guarantee that it's gone if I want to. How do I do that? Well, I also brought a bunch of land speeders in addition to these whirlwinds. Land speeders, as we'll find out, are going away.
I do love the fact that you said a bunch of land speeders. You have a trio.
Yeah, that's a bunch. You got one, you got a few, and then a bunch, because I don't ever pay attention past that. It's just a bunch. Yeah, they got land. Yeah, they have multi-meltas, whatever. I maybe killed 2 things during the tournament with them. And then the Hail Strike. What does this combo do? We'll get this into the combo section, but basically, Land Speeder can look at a target it can see, and your blast weapons get +1 to hit and ignore cover against that target. What are blast weapons? Well, you have lots of frag launchers, and then conveniently, your whirlwinds have blast. So basically, I ignore the indirect penalty. It's like I'm a Desolator unit standing still. Yeah, Desolator unit that fires Power Fist through the air, because at 8 - 2, 2, you are literally Power Fist.
Somebody make a meme of that. I need a flying, literally something shooting Power Fists across the board.
Yeah, and Matt is right. Very stress-inducing is what my opponents would see, because basically every unit that could die to a whirlwind, they needed to keep off the table. And that was, as we'll get into it, that's part of the main strategy. Yes, we have Calgar, we have Ventris. For people who don't know Ventris, Ventris basically in formations picks a unit and gives that unit deep strike.
Doesn't have to go with them either.
Doesn't have to go with them, and I will tell you 100% of the time, my Uriel Ventris was alone because he has to be. He cannot attach to any units in my list, and all he does is give an aggressor unit deep strike and then walk in the table and score points. That's all he does. He killed a rhino once. Sure, good job, Uriel. You killed a rhino. I already talked about the aggressor units. Then we're going staple. You got to take at least 3 Inceptors. Dropping within 3 inches. Brad hates the plasma. We talked about this already and argued. My plasma let me punch up several times to where, sure, I need to take an objective. They drop down and score it. Oh, I need to kill a rhino. Drop down, kill it. I need to basically just whittle away something in combination with other units, like whirlwinds. They did that, so they were great for that. Then we have a great combo of Librarian and Phobos armor and 5 infiltrators. Basically, this was my take over the board and prevent you from coming in unit. Just infiltrate them up, can't be shot within 12, and you can't arrive within 12, which means now that you've put all your stuff in reserve, you physically cannot interact with this unit. Great. We got 5 scouts, kind of similar. They help me take over the board. They infiltrate up. You can't shoot them unless you're inside 12. Sometimes they did cool things like snipe out guard characters. They attempted to snipe out a Spirit Seer, but he rolled all 4s. And then we have the Calidus Assassin, who's just up-downing every turn to score a bunch of points. I think that's... Oh, the Hail Strike. Hail Strike, shoot a unit. If you get a hit, your army gets +1 AP against that one target that you choose out of the ones that you hit. I think that's it. I think I covered everything now. Oh, did we lose a Brad?
How about Brad?
There's Brad.
There's Brad. What happened over here?
Yeah, there we go. We found him.
I stayed.
Just right. All right, so we have...
Eddie, I love Eddie talking shit to you, by the way. What a clever list. Hope nothing happens that would get rid of all those unique vital units.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly right. We'll get to it. Here you are, the linchpin of our list. He died literally in the middle of the tournament, and I love telling my opponents that as they're like, wow, that's so good and so annoying. And I was like, yeah, he died literally right now, the second. You know that book over there? Yeah, he's not in it. He's gone. He's completely gone.
A good times roll. Tell me about this tournament run you had here. You got all your games up. I want to talk about what were the key units in each of the games.
Right. So start off with a fun one. We're playing against Leagues of Votan with double Hecaton and double Thunderkin. We were on Scorched Earth, so that's where the one where you burn objectives. We have no, as you'll see, it's very common. We have Chilling Rain, which is no weird mission rules, and then we're Dawn of War. Okay, so what were the key things here? The key things here that I'm worried about playing against Leagues of Votan is they deduce that they need to start guys in reserve, and then they put their Hecatons on the line and attempt to go first and run at me. Because if I am deep striking my, I'm using Uriel to give my aggressors deep strike, and I'm trying to drop them in and do a ton of damage. If I don't go first, and Hecatons are in my deployment zone on turn 2, that's a problem. That is a real problem, because I can realistically only like hurt a Hecaton with the aggressors off the board. And I definitely need them on the board to take care of it. So I'm worried about that. Thankfully, my opponent completely disrespected the Whirlwinds. He started one Thunderkin unit on the board, and I drew Assassinate, and I picked up all but one Thunderkin on one wound and the character with all three of my Whirlwinds, and that felt awesome. It felt awesome. And I guarantee you, my friendly Votan opponent will never make that mistake again. We also got to do a cool play. I got to start my infiltrating Phobos unit up and charge him on turn 1 and just charge all of his units. And that felt awesome because Votan can give one unit fall back and shoot. They can't give all three of the units.
And a big thing on that is you have to recognize when someone does not have counterpunch. A lot of armies don't. Or they'll have only one key thing, and if it's somewhere off on the board, you can just try to bully the shooting armies and really stall them for a turn or two. And a lot of times that is the difference between winning and losing that game. And that's what we talk about when we talk about practicing, implementing these things and making those calls of, hey, I could try to kill this, try to kill that, get in this position. Would this just be better if I just literally grabbed everyone and hugged him to death? Are you doing any damage? I don't care. They can't move.
Exactly. And that was actually key for this game because I was able to tie up three of his units and just remove one from the board. He basically didn't have enough tools to actually get where he needed to go anymore. And eventually that made him push 2 Hecatons, a Sagittar, and a Hearthkin unit over to one side objective in the middle. And I dropped my army down and picked up both Hecatons, a Sagittar, and all the guys inside in one turn. And that was basically the whole game. Moving on, we played CSM next. This was on priority targets, so you get 5 victory points for holding an objective, up to 10. And at the end...
So this never makes sense to me. So you've got 6 objectives with a cap of 10 points per. And I'm like, why? So much why. But continue.
Yes, and for everyone wondering, Brad, would you say this is the easiest mission to score a primary on?
Oh, it's wildly crazy. Because of the fact that you've got those, because Hidden Supply says you split the middle into 2. It actually makes it even easier because in the GW terrain, when you split them into 2 and go diagonally, it puts the middle ones behind terrain now. So the objective you usually couldn't take from behind cover, you now can. So
exactly. I helped my opponent to 5 on primary on this mission.
I don't even understand that, but continue.
This is actually a good example. If you saw the Deal With It Chaos Space Marines, I talked about how not every unit needs to be Nurgle. And you go, well, I want the exploding 5s, and I want to defend myself. But the problem is, if your opponent just says, okay, I'm going to shoot one of those units, and you go Nurgle, and they go, cool, I'll just put everything else into another unit. And that's exactly what happened in this game. He left... He did the correct thing, which is what I expected people to do, and he put exactly half of his army in reserve. He left some Nurgle cultists in the back. He left a Nurgle Hellbrute and some Forge Fiends out. And basically I said, cool, oath your cultists in the back that are Nurgle. Shoot them. And he said, Nurgle strat. And I said, cool, my land speeder has already looked at your Hellbrute. All 3 roll ones into your Hellbrute, picked it up, and it exploded turn 1. And that was basically the game, because then he didn't have his Hellbrute to push through damage now that I was out. His cultists in the back could spend a CP every turn, and then I shoot the rest of his army, or he could just let them go. And eventually he made what I think is the right choice in a bad situation and just let his cultists go. And I put baby in the corner and ran away from Abaddon one time, and that was basically the whole game.
So, Dark Angels, you're playing Purge the Foe, which is a very different mission for this, because Purge the Foe is hold one, hold more, kill one, kill more for the primary. And then we add diagonal deployment.
Yeah, and this is actually very hard for me. I'm playing Dark Angels. They're playing basically the same thing I am, just without whirlwinds. But he also did the same thing and put half his army in reserve. And the units he left on board were a Phobos infiltrator unit, a Land Raider, some Deathwing Knights, and another infiltrator unit. And whirlwinds don't really shoot well into any of those things. So the approach I took was to push aside very heavily with my own infiltrator units. What that did for me is basically opened up the rest of the board, because he gets to pick a way he wants his knights to go, and they're basically just going that way. And the Land Raider picks a way it's going to go, and I pick either the Land Raider or the Deathwing Knights, and I basically just hit that with everything. Ended up, he dropped everything in one turn on me, right where he could, and tried to damage check me right away. And thankfully, I was able to use Armor of Contempt and cover to basically mitigate all his damage. And then, now that it's all on the board, I picked it all up with whirlwinds.
Get you were winning it up. Tell me what happened in this Death Guard game. Supply drop, board quarter deployment, no specials. That's a super small score, brother. Did you move block him like instantaneously? Tell me what happened here.
So this was against Rob from Goonhammer. He was a great opponent, and he gave me some props going in for my play, and that always feels good. He was playing the Death Guard. He was playing Mortarion. He's playing triple Plague Burst Crawler, so he was firing a little bit indirect back, and he also made the correct decision and put most of his army into reserve. And this was for anybody who doesn't know, this is the Alpha Omega mission. So randomly after we deploy, just one of the objectives is going to disappear. And unfortunately for me, my objective just decided it was going to leave. So that meant I had to be as aggressive as possible. And I had to do something I didn't want to do, which is stat check Mortarion instantly. Not really a position you ever want to be in, but one I was in anyway. So basically, I set up the board to where he only had one option, and that was to gain some ground in the middle and let me take over every other quarter and all the sides, including his deployment zone. So basically, since Death Guard is slow, I knew wherever he'd be dropping in was where he would stay. So I basically dropped and screened every single part of the table out except for the direct middle and maybe a little bit to the right of it. And then killed Mortarion and a Rhino and something else in the first turn. Another instance where I got to use 3 Whirlwinds with Oath of Moment to just pick up a whole Plague Marine unit and the character, just right off the jump.
Oath of Moment's hell of a drug.
Once that happened and I picked up Mortarion, he didn't really have a whole lot of punch back. It was more of just trying to keep my score down. And basically every time he hit me, it wasn't as hard as I hit him, and he just ran out of units there at the end.
I like that a lot. We go into the top bracket. You're playing the Imperial Fist. You played some very different stuff. There was a lot of variety at this tournament, too. I was looking at the actual breakdown. There was a ton of different lists, which I do like quite a bit, which does mean that when we get ready for tournaments now, you have to make a very versatile army. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, and I played against Imperial Fist this time. This is Vital Ground, so basically 5 objective mission, and the middle just goes away. That objective just pieces out. It goes to Alaska. Interesting Imperial Fist list. He also played a Ballistus. He played Assault Intercessors, Torgaradon, just with 6 Eradicators.
I mean, Torgaradon's a badass, so you take that back. He should always be. If you're playing Imperial Fist, he's the only guy I like in Imperial Fist. He's awesome.
right? And he had MSU Terminators with Terminator Captain, and basically his game plan was 2 Valiants. Very scary for my land speeders because they can just look at a land speeder and it goes away. Basically, this matchup came down to, since we're both playing Gladius, we both have access to the same tools. We're both taking the Bolter Discipline Biologis unit. Who is going to hit who first and make it hurt? So he took a very passive turn 1 because I deployed very defensively. Because one of the advantages of playing Whirlwinds is you can deploy defensively and then still hit your opponent. So I was able to deploy where he just couldn't see me at all. And so when he got the roll to go first, he had to move up. And I popped it. Calgar's unit always has advance and charge. So I just ran at him immediately. I think in my first turn, I picked up 10 Assault Intercessors, picked up like 3 of his Aggressors with the Whirlwinds, and then charged into a Captain and some Heavy Intercessors and tagged a tank. So at that point, he's lost like 300 or 400 points of units, and he was really, really shell-shocked. And we actually did take a minute during this game because I always want to play people at their very best, and because he was very shell-shocked that this happened, and I was able to do so much damage to him right off the jump, that we actually just took like 5 minutes and just sat there, and he did a great job of just composing himself and taking a second to think about what he needed to do, and he did his best to retaliate, and then...
But that's a big deal, though. I want to pause on that because I tell, coaching-wise, I tell people all the time that, and I literally really lean into this quite a bit. Walk over, hit the bathroom, hit the bar, just get whatever, get a diet, get a shot, get whatever you need to do. But take a second to regroup and think about your game plan. There's no point in playing panicky when you just got hit in the face. You know what I mean? A lot of times you need to slow that game down to figure out. I pulled a lot of games out, and you're not always going to win those games, but you're definitely not going to win if you play from a position of being tilted, basically. Tilted, panicked, whatever.
Right, and this was an instance, he takes his time to really compose himself, and then he realized I put him in a very difficult position, even with my charge. I was able to basically use the move D6 if you get within 9 of me on the unit that did all this initial charge damage to make it so that half of his units wouldn't get to shoot. And from that point on, he realized, oh, I don't have the damage actually anymore to pick up that whole unit. And that was pretty much the game. Since he couldn't respond anymore to all the damage I had done and didn't get to do hardly any damage back, I then brought in all my reserves and picked up everything that he brought. And we called it there.
Let's take just a second to both channels. We're going on Dice with Rice and The Death of Glory. If you could like and subscribe, it really does help quite a bit. Like especially, because it puts us on the metrics and it lets other people see us. So let's go into Quentin Rampage Johnson's list. Your only loss of the weekend.
Yeah. So Quentin, Quentin's quote from this game was, "This is the indirect war no one asked for," and he's 100% right, because Quentin's list has triple Night Spinner in it. Triple Night Spinner is definitely where I was going when I stopped with my Eldar. It is just very oppressive to play against Night Spinners, and specifically how this has to work out when you're playing my list is you do not want to take the indirect fight head on. That does not mean your Warlords do not want to target Night Spinners and try to take them out. You're going to be hitting on 4s rerolling, wounding on 5s rerolling, but then he saves on 4s. So not great when he has more wounds than you, and you're just not getting.
He's also doing devastating wounds on 6s for you.
Exactly, and coming back, I don't get a save because he's just going to fish for 6s, or if it works out that he can just use a Fate die and immediately deal 2 damage to a Whirlwind.
Now,
not going to work out.
In this match, did you think that you could just pick off Farseers right away, though? Because they are attached to nothing.
Okay, so there is 2 schools of thought. The first one is that, yes, I can get the Phoenix Gem popped right away on the Skyrunner, and I can get the Farseer popped right away, and then I just don't have to worry about those.
Because then you
That
lose
is
you use the -1 to wound that's going to go on that Wraith Guard or one of the big guys. And then you'd also, the bigger thing though, is the Phoenix Gem is putting out Guide. So full
Yep.
rerolls.
Yep. And so that's a huge boon for specifically that 10-man Wraithguard unit. And Quentin correctly deduced that all of his small stuff needed to be off the board in reserve, which doesn't leave me with a lot of shots outside of that. So because I went first in this matchup, I chose to do what my list is specifically designed to do, which is pincer the Wraithguard unit, oath it, and then take it out. So how does that work? Well, the first school of thought is you play this nice tight game with Eldar, you try to take out these Farseers, and eventually they get to do things like drop Shadow Specters in, shoot them, move 6 inches, fire and fade, move again, and take away your primary objective. So basically what I found is that every time you try this, if you're of equal skill, you're going to play a close game where they're going to eventually win. Because their rules are a little more unfair than yours. And that's just part of dealing with it. You got to know that off the gate, and you got to accept it. So level 2 then is, how am I winning this game? Because if I play this nice tight game where we're both making the right decisions, I'm going to lose by a few points.
Let's talk about the mission real quick. We did skip that because it is a wildly different mission. You're playing the ritual scrambler fields where you can't deep strike onto objectives, right, and you can't forward deploy onto objectives. And the ritual means that we're starting with one objective that means anything, and we're dropping objectives down after that.
Right. So this is it's also one of the worst deployments for my style of list. Sweeping engagement means if you want, you can just have control of half the board. You can just deploy all of your units to where I can't really deny you being in one certain area or not. Yeah, so because of that, because level 2 is, okay, I know that if we play this game right, I'm going to lose by a few points, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So what do I do? Well, if I, and this is where my list design came in, if I pincer the Wraithguard to where I have land speeders shooting out to either side, and I have a Thunderstrike on one side, I can make Quentin move backwards and still hit him with all my whirlwinds and give him on average 20 to 24 saves on them at AP2 ignore cover, and just see how the 4-ups shake out. Then from that point, I bring in my aggressors from reserves and try to make 9-inch charges. And that plan sounds horrible. You're 100% right. If you're at home right now going, that is a terrible plan, you're right. But that's how you win this matchup. With my specific list, I knew that I would lose by a few points if I did anything else. If I played nice and tight Warhammer, I'm losing. So instead, I identified what I needed to do to win and tried to do it. Now, in this case, did not make my 9-inch charges, sure. I handed Quentin 28 saves, and he made pretty much all of them. Can't do anything about that. And so that was kind of the downfall right out the gate. I chose that plan. I chose what I thought was the way to win, and just didn't work out.
That is true. C-137 is the good rig. So let's jump to the next. We've got another CSM playing Servo Skulls. By the way, how the hell did Servo Skulls make it in to the last day's missions? Someone explain that to me.
Oh man. Okay, so everyone did complain about Servo Skulls, but again, this is deal with it, not complain about it. So we played. We're playing at CSM. He's playing your standard CSM list. He's got the Nurgle Rhino with the Chaos Lords attached to some Chosen. He's got the 3 Forge Fiends and Abaddon solo, some Warp Talons, basically just playing standard CSM. Okay, the advantage that I had on this mission is I had played Servo Skulls and knew what I wanted to do. And my opponent, because Servo Skulls is a weird choice, had not played on Servo Skulls before. If you don't know, this is the kicking objectives is really weird. You have to do a lot of weird and different things that don't really make any sense in other missions. And since I knew what was going on, that was a huge boon to me. And I did get to do funny things, and you saw I got the 100 there. I got to push 2 of the objectives just straight into his deployment zone and get a bazillion points just right off the jump. that's just part of it. It's just kind of silly. But I do have to give my opponent here major props. I put him down to 2 models on the board on one turn and had screened out all of his reserves. And he took a minute to compose himself and actually turned it into a game. He correctly identified, hey, Abaddon needs to do this. I need to not fail this charge. I need to move exactly right here to score my points. And from that point, he made it a game with a single Rhino and Abaddon left on the table to my full army minus a Thunderstrike, which he shot down with some indirect off of Obliterators. So this basically came down to how much time does my opponent have to pick up pieces of my army? And I gave him the choice of going for the objectives and trying to score primary or going after me. And he tried to do both. And because I, again, put him down to only a Rhino and an Abaddon on board on one turn, he didn't have enough to get it all done in the time that we had.
He was just going door to door offering beatdowns. Let's talk about this final game. This is you guys went from pure insanity wackiness to full on the normalest of normal stuff. I guess chosen battlefield's not normal. That's deploying your own objectives. But taking a hold, sweeping engagement.
Yeah, as I said, sweeping engagement is kind of the worst for my army because you can get so much value across the battlefield by just like controlling different corners. However, I played against my good friend Hunter Nichols, and he was also bringing an artillery list, which meant I did not have to worry about taking over part of the board because he didn't put anything in reserve, and he committed to the artillery fight. This was an interesting laying of the battlefield. I basically clumped together some objectives and then put 2 far apart. What does that do in this artillery war? Well, I have 2 units that can't be shot. And if you were bringing all artillery and I have 2 units that can't be shot, either I keep all of your army in one place near 3 objectives, and I get to score 10 for primary no matter what every single turn by just placing my other 2 units on the other side of the table, or which is what happened. The first one did happen. I ended up picking that side. Or Hunter spreads out, and Guard with artillery spam does not particularly want to spread out all of its resources everywhere. So Hunter chose the battle where it would take place because he brought 60 Kriegsmen and characters and just planted them on one side of the table and said, this side of the table is mine. And I went, awesome. I am going to deploy all of my whirlwinds on the line and my land speeders, and I'm going to run at you and tag every unit. And that is exactly what I did. Hunter did have a bad break in this one. For those of you who don't know, Guard's Primary Psyker has the ability to roll, and on a 2-up, the unit gets a 4-up invulnerable against shooting. Hunter failed 3 of the 5 times he attempted it.
Roll better,
That is
bro.
just unlucky. That is just unlucky. Almost as unlucky as a shield captain and custodes never fighting once at ATC, despite rolling it 5 times. So I know your pain, Hunter.
We're going to go back to that Carmona in just a minute. Great comment in the chat. I'm going to go with this real quick. So I'm going to go right back to your comment in the next slide. How to prepare for a super major. Preparation, our usual 5 steps. Preparation, identifying strengths and weaknesses, making a plan, practice, making adjustment. And both of us are literally do this. It's a big deal all the time. Now, preparation. Now, one of the biggest things you always have to look at when you're preparing for a tournament is what type of terrain they're going to have in the tournament. Because if we're playing GW terrain, I know that I'm going to have to do a little bit of adjustments. I know what those adjustments are going to be, but it's going to vary on the terrain set that we're playing. Are we playing 1 and 4? Are we playing 2 and 3? I'm going to adjust appropriately. Now, when you're playing player place terrain, I can kind of make my board the same every single game. So I don't have to make as many adjustments. I figure out exactly where I want to be, and that's going to be also what I'm bringing to be there. So I can bring those specific units that are going to jump from piece to piece, because I can make sure that the exact distance from those pieces is what I need. So you're going to have a kind of a base of the same, but you're going to definitely adapt what's in your list depending on whether you know that you can put an exact firing base. Like one of my favorite things if you're doing player place terrain is I use their little cargo containers and stuff like that. And I almost always put them on my backpack field, especially if you're playing like Hammer and Amber or something. So you can get your every game strategies ready for that, because you can use the same, or you're going to have to do it a little bit different on this. So tell me about whirlwinding properly.
All right, so yes, as Brett pointed out, we literally do this, and I wanted to take this as a good example now that this is my first singles super major of the edition, to show you that I literally did this. The same thing we were telling you, we don't have a paywall or anything. I literally do this, and I went 7-1 at a super major. It works. Just you can plug and chug. That's how we set it up. So I got a whirlwind, I got a land speeder, I have a hail strike, and I have oath of moment. What does this do? The maximum amount of damage I could do to a unit with this list. I could be +1 to hit, I could ignore cover, I could have an extra AP, and I could reroll all hits and wounds on one thing. And that's fine, because sometimes you only really need to kill one thing a turn that's, threatening a unit that is going to be in position to score next turn. And I use these pieces together all the time, just to make sure I could do that. Then we have the one that everybody knows, Bolt of Discipline on the Apothecary Biologis. Lethal and sustained 5s and 6s in Dev Doctrine. Storm of Fire, an extra AP and ignore cover. The Aggressors get an extra AP against the closest target. And then Uriel Ventris just gives them Deep Strike. So I have the option to just start them off the board and drop them precisely where I need them to be. Then we have Calgar and the Aggressors plus the Biologist. This is the second unit that has options. I can play Calgar alone if I really need to. I can play him with the Aggressors just to add a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln to the unit for 6 wounds. It's a huge deal with Armor of Contempt, because I can effectively have those 2 chumps just tank everything. And man, did they tank a lot this weekend. Then we have the Infiltrators and the Phobos Librarian with squad tactics, who can't be shot outside of 12 and just move if you get close to them. So this is an extremely hard unit to actually pin down.
I want to go back to the wall real quick, because a couple things came up, the same thing we were talking about with the terrain. So with the player place, you do get longer lines and bigger stuff. And both the GW layouts and player place can have staging areas. It's just the difference in the distance that you have to cover. So a couple of the GW layouts are very, very friendly for melee armies. You see that they're able to. In player place terrain, you almost always have to get yourself a little bit more speed if you want to go somewhere, because you have to place that terrain and then go to the next piece of terrain. So a lot of times you need to be faster on player place terrain than you do on the GW sets.
That's actually a really good point. Being able to, speed is obviously king in 40K. How fast can you move? How fast can you get in a position matters so much. But it matters even more on certain terrain formats. This one was actually interesting. All the tables were different. They either were layout 1 or layout 3 or layout 4, and so when we're playing these missions each round, the people right next to us could be playing on a completely different terrain layout, which is very interesting to see.
That's weird itself. Matto coming with a $5 super chat. Any thoughts on the hyper-cluttered center terrain layout? Created interesting games, but curious if you'd want to see it at other events as well. I kind of like it because you can always shoot the middle objective. So depending on how you make your army, you can set up move blocks for that, because you know where they're going to stage. I mean, it is scary because they can get pretty damn close to you. There's also pockets, especially when you're looking at 1 and 2, whatever. 2 of the GW layouts have that little pocket that you can get really close to and have the wall. So you have to stage, again, pre-measure. It's a big deal on that. You do have to look for armies that can, in that type of terrain, that can either counter shoot, counter punch, or counter both. because you're going to have some close firefights because people are going to be right up on top of you, and you need to be able to deal with that.
I'm also, Matt, I'm all for us only referring to it as the donut, because there's a giant donut in the middle. And I want that to catch on because that's the only way I remember that one. I think that layout is fine. I'm not opposed to it at all. I think there's a lot of play to it where you have this. It looks like it's all bunched up in the middle and you don't have anything going on, but as Brad said, there's all these little sneaky angles you can get on people that opens it up a lot more when you start actually interacting with it.
Ooh, you know what I'm going to do? Because I'm always good, Dad. I'm going to give your army strengths and you're going to give your armies weaknesses.
Fair enough.
This makes me so happy. Flying, indirect power fist to the face. Please, someone figure that out. I need that on a meme. Great single target damage into any target because of Oath and Boater Discipline. Get that extra AP. Obviously, full rerolls is a hell of a drug. Versatility. Gladius Doctrine of the Adaptive Strategy. Marines are supposed to be adaptable. That's her whole thing. And unshootable trash is fantastic. Lone operator's a hell of a drug. It's very big to be able to just sit down and go, oh, you've got all the shooting in the world? Cool. I'm still scoring a 10 no matter what happens.
Yeah, and I did that so many times throughout the tournament. Just having these unshootable units is so good.
What about the weaknesses here?
All right, fine. Okay.
Bad Dad, what do we have for the weaknesses?
I'm now bad dadding myself. All right, so obviously this list has some weaknesses. When you are bringing a very focused list on what it wants to do, it's going to come with some problems. The first one is I'm actually really fragile. If I don't take over the board and hit you, you're probably just going to pick up my stuff pretty easily back. Aggressors, yes, I have Calgar's two little goons that can tank a good amount of damage, but a few bad rolls, suddenly they're gone, and wow, I lost all those aggressors in one activation. I mean, there was one time a Forge Fiend shot me and just killed 4 right off the gate, and that is not good. So we are generally fragile. Then the second weakness, T9 vehicles. I actually don't have a lot. Let's see. Do I have any? I have 3 hunter killers that can hit wound on 3s.
We talked about this before we went live, preparing my new list, and I was like, your list gives me palpitations more than I already have. Somebody just walks up and goes, I don't think you have damage. I'm just going to move forward.
Exactly. Playing against all War Dogs was something I knew could happen, but I very realistically said, okay, if they play perfect, I'm probably not going to win this one. But I am going to basically give it my all if I play that, and I am going to be as sneaky as I could possibly be to chip out points, to chip out damage, and hope that was good enough. But that is a real weakness for my list, is Power Fists are awesome until your opponent's T9, and then you're just like, ooh, wounded on 5s. Not great. Which leans into the next one, which is you have to play well. There's no room for error when suddenly your units are fragile and you only have, a select amount of damage. Not great.
Yeah. Yep. Let's talk about your plan. Because as I say all the time, which is why we always boldface it, you have to lean into the strengths. You mitigate the weaknesses, but you can't spend too many times mitigating weakness. Just play a different faction at that point. To be honest with you, you really got to lean into your faction strengths. What does your list do? Make it do that even better. Score those points. Do what your list is trying to do.
Exactly. And as I just pointed out, I didn't say, oh, I can't beat T9. I'm going to throw 3 units of Eradicators in here. I went, okay, I just have to play a different kind of game. So that's what I did. As you can see, people always ask, well, are you taking tactical or are you taking fixed? Are you taking tactical every single time with the way I set up my list? Every single time I played this list, I don't care if you're Tau, I don't care if you brought 15 characters, and I did play against 2 lists that gave out max Bring It Down and Assassinate. And I did not take it. I played tactical.
Can't be tricked.
And 100%. Even when Quentin, I almost got Quentin to do it. I almost got Quentin. He looked over and went, tactical, and I went, yeah, okay, fair enough. So what's the plan? What is the plan with this list? I've hinted at it. It is literally to dominate the board early. How do we do that? Put some infiltrators out there and just say, this space is mine. You literally have to come in the open to get to me, and I will shoot you with a little bit of shooting I have, or I will throw some indirect into you to stop it. What does that do for me? That leads me to denying your reserve area. You already put stuff in reserve because you saw 3 whirlwinds and you went, this crazy man brought 3 whirlwinds. I am just going to hide my army from him. And I went, awesome. I now have the board and I will suddenly drop in all my reserves. I'll blow them right away. And now you can't come in. Once they can't come in, they are stuck in the corner, or sometimes, poking out a little bit towards the middle, which is fine. What that does for you as when playing this list is suddenly every tactical card you draw, you just score because you are everywhere. You're in every quarter. You are on most of the objectives, and your opponent has to try and move on to an objective to actually win the game, which means you're going to start scoring Storm Hostile. You're going to score Overwhelming Force, even though they only have really 1 or 2 places to go. And, 4th point, yes, I'm going to score all the secondaries whenever I draw them. My list has infinite amount of unshootable trash. It is the Calidus going up and down. You have to actually move on to the objectives now, which allows me to score things like Storm Hostile and Overwhelming Force.
I like it. And the big deal about this is what allows you to do this. Let's look at the key units. Actually, you know what? I'm pulling back one of my old things. Over the weekend, you got your key units here. We know you're going to lose a couple things because of the things going to Legends, but who is your MVP and who is on out of the things that are staying in the book? Who is your MVP and who's on the chopping block?
MVP. Okay. It's a toss-up on MVP, so I'm going to come back to that. Chopping block is the 2nd aggressor brick. Don't need it anymore. There are other things to be doing. The reason I brought the 2nd aggressor brick was when I have the 1st brick with Bolter Discipline off the board, the 2nd brick can combine with 2 of my land speeders to suddenly be AP3, ignoring cover, hitting on 2s, and that turns out pretty good when your opponent's not expecting it. Now that I don't have that, the 2nd aggressor brick, we're kicking that to the curb. Don't need that anymore. We'll look for that somewhere else. MVP. MVP was Uriel Ventris. 100%. He scored me no less than 70 secondary points, and he allowed me to terrorize my opponents with deep striking aggressors. Number 2 is definitely Calgar. I am someone who knows exactly how to spend the CP to deal damage, and that allows me to play this style of list. I don't get 2 extra CP so I can hold them every turn. I get 2 extra CP so I can storm a fire and move my guys. And I just want to be doing that every single turn, over and over again.
Who's in the chopping block? Who's getting his release papers? That's what I get.
So, of the guys that are staying, as I said, I think the 2nd aggressor brick kind of is the worst one. It was really important for this list, but I think that one's out of here. I may look at changing the Hailstrike. The Hailstrike is staying, but I don't know if I need it for that many points.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think it's overpriced a little bit still, even after they brought him down. So, we should do another. I'd like to look at it. Let's go to the practice, but I do want to look at, because I'm going to play some Marines in my next tournament, and I wouldn't mind going into what Sean and I are doing in our next list and why with the new things. So we might make a video out of that. Let me know if that's something everyone would like to see. So let's talk about the practice and what we found in practice, because as always, it's super important, especially when you're going to multiple tournaments even, that you have to be super efficient with your practice, because you need results now. You need to figure out what works and what doesn't. That means that, as usual, communicating with your practice partner is paramount, because you need to start getting real results, real data. So how do you practice?
So how specifically I practice, because I want to show you that, yes, we do exactly this. And if you watched, if you were a Patreon member for the Death of Glory, you watched Brad and I play a game of Eldar versus Oryx, where we did a full practice session of like, hey, we're going to make the most optimal decisions we possibly can with average dice rolls and see how this shakes out. One of the things that I did is I played a lot of Eldar. And you heard me break down kind of my thoughts going into Quentin, and that was my one loss, was to Eldar. And after playing them over and over and over again, that's how I figured out that's what needs to go on. Because if every time you lose by a few points, then you need to do something wildly different. And if I hadn't played a ton of Eldar games, I wouldn't know that. Then I consulted people who are better than me. It doesn't matter who that is for you. As long as you're always talking with people who are better than you are getting different opinions that you trust. You can start to change your ideas of what's going on. I talked a lot with Mark Perry. I talked a lot with Brad. I talked with Steven. And basically, I used all of their thoughts and opinions and lists and everything they shared to decide what I was going to do. And then finally, I practiced it. I physically put it on the table. And I played some TTS, I played some RTTs, and I just practiced denying what my opponent could actually do on each of their turns.
Jesus. Brad hates players because he raised to think they were dragons. That's how old he is. I just lost my complete train of thought. So your plan's to basically dominate the board. It's a board control army. Put people in the back. A lot of times it doesn't matter even if you get tabled. It's literally, I've played a billion games of Orcs now with it. And that's my strategy always. Take the board, put people in the corner, hope that you out by a billion. Now, this is a big deal, making adjustments. Because, I'm going to your first comment, because you were originally was the best thing to play. And then you swapped out of it after playing a lot of early practice games with Eldar on that terrain.
Yep. This is something I told Quentin is I am undefeated with Eldar. I've never lost. It hasn't even really been close. That is the most boring thing I have ever experienced in my entire life. If you go into every game and you have practiced and played every decision and you know what your opponent's going to do and they don't have any counterplay to it, that is boring. That is absolutely boring. The one thing I was worried about playing Eldar is playing against World Eaters who just ran straight at me with everything. And even then, I didn't think it was awful. I just thought it was kind of bad if they went first. When you find yourself in that situation, you need to ask yourself, am I literally... So I played 27 hours of Warhammer. Are you going to be bored and miserable for 27 hours of your life? Or are you going to make a different decision?
Like playing Marines, playing Orcs, playing whatever.
Playing something I enjoyed, something that was fun.
It's a big deal as you make the thing that gives you joy the best chance in the tournament. Because we're still playing with tiny toy soldiers. You want to make it a good time.
That's exactly right. If you take a minute and ask yourself, how happy am I going to be doing this? And the answer is not very happy. Don't do that. I'm telling you right now. You don't need to do it to win. You don't need to do it to go 7-1. And I think there was a real chance that I could have beaten Quentin. And even then I would have played Sisters. And man, I want my Whirlwinds to meet that Sister army. And that would have been, fine. But I made the decision not to based on all that practice. And jumping to the second point, my land speeders are going away. I now just have 2 models that are hanging out in the void. Sure, I can play them in non-match play games, but
why?
I'll be honest, I've never played a non-match play game. So I wanted a chance to play with the models that I built and painted before I just can't use it anymore.
I do want to go to Andy's question real quick because it goes really big on these adjustments thing. He goes, how do you balance the advice you get from the people who are better? They have their own play style that will color how they view your list and validation of units. For instance, myself versus Crawley, who have wildly different styles. So we're going to give you different advice on that.
Exactly. That's actually a really good point, Indy, because you're right. When I'm talking to Mark Perry and he slowly tries to tempt me into playing Chaos, which he does every single time, I love you, Mark. I'm not gonna go to your crazy chaos list every time. He really focuses on board control, but also really interesting lines of play. You know, Mark is the kind of guy who's not afraid to be like, I'm going to make this 10 and you're going to lose. And then he takes his shoes off. Sorry, his shoes were already off. And then he makes the 10.
Shoes are already off.
And then, you know, you're in a rough spot.
And he pregame made 2 10-inch charges for you.
Correct. He already made them. It's already done. He's in your deployment zone. So you have to keep that in mind. And part of that is ask them. You can ask them, say, hey, how do you tend to play? If they're your friends, if they're your in this case colleagues, you can be like, hey, I know your stuff. Brad, trash master. I know Brad, no matter what we were talking about before we started, Brad is going to tell me to put trash in my list. I know that. I know that 100%.
So much trash.
Mr. Crawley is going to be like, hey, why aren't you abusing this really broken rule? And I'll be like, I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable doing that or whatever. And it's perfectly legal. But, you know, if I'm going to talk with Brad and Crawley, I'm going to end up with a trash Eldar list that basically just makes me want to not play. If I talk with Mark long enough, I'm going to play the craziest CSM list you've ever seen in your life. How do I balance all that together? You have to take a step back. You have to say, what do I actually enjoy aside from all these things that are being thrown at me? Because you get
a Brad size step or a regular size step.
A normal Brad size step. There you go. Normal Brad size. You just take, you don't go all the way into your little hole, but you take a second to say, what do I actually enjoy? What do I have painted? What excites me? Is it rolling lots of dice? Is it playing massive, powerful models with good saves? And that dictates how you want to change. Because one thing that you're going to get from each person who's better than you is, hey, your list struggles to this. Hey, what if they do this? And you're going to get that from each player's perspective, from their style of play, because everybody already has in their mind how they're beating you. And now you now know how each of those styles is going to try to beat you. And you basically make your informed decision after that.
Like it. Let's talk about the fact that we've got a whole new codex coming out. Or, okay. Sorry, it's not out. It's coming out. It just straight out.
It's here. It's here. The last thing I want to leave you guys with is, and I saw it several times in chat, is how do I just plug and play this list? It looks wild. Okay. Cool things that I am looking at, and I will spoil some of them. Uriel Ventris giving Centurion Devastators Deep Strike and playing them in Vanguard. The rules work that now that they have Deep Strike, you can pay 1 CP and just re-Deep Strike them every turn. That is very powerful. Centurion Devastators are tough, and they absolutely will take out 1 unit a turn. That is basically what my list did with the Biologis unit, with Bolter Discipline. So you now don't lose a whole lot by doing that. Speeders, obviously, get the speeders out of the list. Don't try to take illegal models to a tournament. Don't do that. What we're looking for then is, how do I get this board control? Do I still take 3 whirlwinds now that they don't ignore cover and are hitting on 4s? I don't know. I don't think 3 is probably the answer anymore. So I'm going to look at 2 whirlwinds, some Centurion devs, Uriel to give them Deep Strike, and then potentially I'm going to look at playing around with other good enhancements in the Vanguard detachment. So that would be Blade-driven Deep on, for example, an Apothecary Biologis with Calgar and a company champion unit. That's just
so many points.
Brad hates it because it does one thing.
3 characters and a unit, so expensive.
Oh yeah, Brad hates that, and I love it.
I hate it so much.
Yeah, he hates it so. But that's part of it. Is I know Brad hates that, and I know what I want to do with it, and Brad knows exactly how he would mess it up, and I know exactly how I would stop Brad from messing it up. So, that's one of the things I look at. The second is, I am not ever leaving home without the Phobos Librarian and the Infiltrators. That unit, 10 out of 10. It provides so much freedom on the board to just be like, oh, you can't drop in, and these guys are going to go stand in the open and do this thing. You know, Brad pointed out there are several missions where the objectives are just in the open, and you just walk these guys over there and they do everything, and your opponent can't interact with them.
Lone operators and the infiltrators are a huge deal. It's something that the Marines have a lot of, and you can really take advantage of it too.
Yeah. Also, if you are playing Marines, every list starts with the lieutenant who gives you reroll ones on an objective of your choice at the start of the game. You take that guy in every list. He starts there. I'm not going to start any list without him. We lost reroll wounds on Oath. Basically, that gives us reroll ones back where it matters. Definitely going to look at doing that every single time.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. The last one was my scout snipers, which also don't exist, just turn into regular scouts because it's 20 points cheaper. The damage rarely mattered, and the ability to go off the board and come back is powerful for scoring all your secondary options.
Movement is still key. But when I say movement, it's shot into distance. It's ways to move. Coming in from reserves, going back into reserves, moving outside of the movement phase. Such a big deal. And on that note, I think we're gonna do another one of these on getting ready with the new Marines. What do you think about that?
I think yeah.
Put it in the comments, everybody. I would enjoy doing it, so I hope that you guys will. Plus,
and don't forget to check out Still Frosty Gaming, where Brandon and I do battle reports on Thursdays. You'll get to see a lot of the interesting things that happen when, for example, Tal plays Chaos Demons, or what is our next one? Thousand Suns versus the new Marine Codex. So go check that out too.
And we've also got tomorrow. We'll be on Still Frosty, 1 o'clock. He'll be doing hobby stuff. So, on that note, are you ready to Queen's Wave, my friend?
Oh yeah, let's do it.